Okay, so as you saw in the title of the shiur, and my plan is to go over the Ralbag's intro to the his allegorical treatment of Gan Eden. And I say intro because he has an intro, and then he has his Bir HaMilos, where he explains the terminology of of everything in the story, and then he has his Bir HaDvarim or Bir HaSipur, where he explains the entire story as a walkthrough. So I guess what we'll do is we'll aim to go through the intro, and then if it interests you, we'll continue with his actual commentary. The intro itself is a valuable standalone piece, and I have a feeling that maybe if we go through it, then you'll want to go through the rest also. But we'll see where that leads. Okay, but what we're going to do is we're going to start for the sake of transparency and intellectual honesty, we're going to start with why the Ralbag is wrong. Okay. At least according to the Abravanel. All right. I'm not weighing in on whether the Ralbag is wrong or right, but the Abravanel has a sort of a scathing critique. And I thought it'd be good to start off with a critique before we read the actual thing, just so we're aware of what the problems are going into it, even though it might be biasing us. So let's do that. Now, if you know anything about the Abravanel, he's extremely wordy. Okay, extremely wordy. So we're not at all going to go through the entire thing. I just highlighted a couple of his key points that we're going to go through, and he actually spends most of his time criticizing and justify and like trying to be Melamed Zechus on the Rambam, who he also takes it allegorically, so we're going to kind of skip that part, but I just want to give you like an overview here. So first thing, you know the style of Abravanel's commentary, like what his method is? I don't know what you're aware of.
Like questions, lots of questions.
So he asks questions and then he answers all of them. And just to give you a inkling here, okay, so let's see. This is part of the section here, I think. No, not yet. I'm just trying to see where he starts off after Vaychul Hashemayim. It doesn't really matter where he starts. If you look through the stuff on Gan Eden, so he has, how many questions is this? I think it's 42. Yeah, 42 questions. Okay, so you can imagine if their questions are that long, how long his commentary is. So worthwhile to go through, definitely, if you want like a full treatment on Gan Eden. But let's start with his overview, okay? So he says like this, Imar, I don't know why it's Imar, I don't know if that's a typo. Okay, so there are some Mefarshim who interpret the story of Gan Eden according to the pshat of the Pesukim, the straightforward meaning. Halach Rashi v'Haramban. Okay, so Rashi and Ramban follow this. V'gam harav Avram ben Ezra hisbir panim laderech hazeh, and Avram ben Ezra shows favoritism to this approach. Okay, you'll see what he means later on. That's actually a dig at the Ibn Ezra. Hold on a second. Because he says that the things are in accordance with their literal meaning. However, he himself does not imagine this, and his heart doesn't think this. So he basically says that the Ibn Ezra was like throwing a bone to the masses and saying, "Oh yeah, take it literally," but he actually doesn't believe this. If you want a good essay on this in English by the leading Ibn Ezra expert, then I can send it to you. It's available free online. Just remind me, and I'll send it to you. It's called something like "Does the Ibn Ezra take Gan Eden as an allegory or literally," or something like that, and he goes through like the arguments for each side. It's clear that he does take it as an allegory, by the way, but okay, anyway, so Abravanel's right. As he based on what he points out later on in his allusions. So he says, if you take this pshat approach, it'll answer the majority of the questions that I raised. Okay, we're just saying a lot. All right. So the second approach is that the story is not in accordance with its pshat. V'lo haya mimenu davar, and nothing in it happened. Aval hu kulo tsura v'remez hamashali'i, but it's entirely an allegory and an illusion, a metaphorical illusion. V'zeh derech harav hamore beprakim mechelek aleph u'perek lamed mechelek beis. Okay, so this is the Rambam. Now remember, this is something that's a little contentious. Does the Rambam hold that Gan Eden is a mashal? Okay, so right now the Abravanel is saying that he does hold it's a mashal, but there are others who disagree. And the question is, even if he holds it's a mashal, where does it start and where does it stop? Okay, Hugam came the MS Derech Rav Ibn Ezra V'zeh Sodo. Okay, again, this is his little dig here, is that Avram Ibn Ezra has a secret, which is he secretly holds that it's an allegorical interpretation, but he claims to hold that it's not. V'harabag Gam came b'pirusha l'Torah, and also the Ralbag on his parish of the Torah. So those are the three head honchos according to the Abravanel. V'chol ha'ochzim darcham v'shosim mehem b'fihem yirtzu sela. So all who cling to their way and drink their waters, in their mouths they will find favor. Now, I've done enough Abravanel that I can sense when he's insulting someone in a veiled way. So I looked at this and I was like, that sounds like a pasuk. So I looked up the pasuk. Okay, so here's the pasuk: Ze darkam kesel lamo v'acharehem b'fihim yirtzu. So if you look at the English here, this is the way of them that are foolish, and of those who after of them approve of their saying Selah. Okay, so he doesn't quote the foolishness part, but he basically says if you follow these guys, then you're a fool. All right, now he explains why he's objecting to this. Joe, I don't know. I just saw you. I don't know when you came in, but what we are doing the Ralbag, but I'm starting off with the Abravanel's critique of the Ralbag, taking it allegorically, so that we know what we're getting into. Okay, so here he lists a couple of critiques. He says, "Im hios shiis alfu betsura v'hemshal." Anyone know what alfu shiis alfu betsura v'hemshal means? Yis alfu. It's a hard one. And it's in Heath file.
He did?
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, alaf is it's also a weird word, right? Because it can mean head. It can mean like learning if you use the Aramaic, Aramaicized version of it. I'm not sure what that is. B'tzur v'hemshal shekol echad nimshal l'shitaso. So each one went according to a shita. Avah hatzad hashavash behem. I mean, it could be that. It could be that. I don't know. Sounds like for the gist of it, it sounds like he's saying that that there are differences in the way that they approach the metaphor. But he says the Hatzad Shava, the common denominator Shabahim, Shekavanas Parsha Kula Oruba Kfi Hi Kfi Hanister Lo Kfi Anigla. But the common denominator is that they hold that all of the parsha, or most of it, is according to the hidden meaning, not according to the nigla, to the open meaning. But there are huge problems with this approach. Okay, when he says sfekos, he means like problems, reasons to doubt it. Mehem she'im haya kol ma shenichtav mehaschalas haTorah ad po me'abria harishona sipur amiti kfi pshuto. So if everything from the beginning of the Torah until this point is a true account according to the pshat, which he is learning that the Rambam, the Ralbag, and Ibn Ezra hold is true, that they hold that it was literal. And also afterwards, in the Torah, then everything is according to the pshat. I bet that that's shenimsa, or maybe I don't know, shenemar. Shebe'emtsa isa nichnasa parsha gedola kazos she'im basi por klal. So then how can you say that there's going to be a gigantic, or in the middle of these two things, there's going to be a huge parsha that is not an actual narrative, and that the pshat is not true at all. But it's just the physical and the metaphysical sciences. Okay. So that's question number one. Problem number one is, if you're going to admit that everything before and after is literal, so then what is this non-literal portion doing here? Okay, and by the way, this is another reason why I wanted to do the Abravanel's problems, because when we identify the problems and we go through the Ralbag, we'll have to assess whether the Ralbag adequately addresses these problems, or if he doesn't, then why he thinks that they're not problems. So that's number one. Umahu hakesher hakishur asher yihe la imkain imash kadam elaha v'hanimshach ahareha. And what is the connection or the relationship between what came before and what came after? Ha'im no nemar nomar nemar Nomar. Shahaisa haparsha azos b'madrega sefer Eov. I think it's Nomar. Are we supposed to say that this parsha is on the level of sefer Eov? Sha'amru sha'asal Moshe Rabbeinu k'fi chakiraso. That Moshe Rabbeinu made the sefer based on his investigation. Hine im kain, im haya hadavar kain. If this were true, lo haya roy lekasva b'soch sipurei haTorah. So it would not be fitting to write it in the books of the Torah, or in the accounts of the Torah. Ki'im sefer bifnei atzmo sefer Eov. Rather, you should make a separate sefer like Eov. So this is his second question. I don't quite get the power of this question. He's saying, if it is I guess, of a radically different nature, then why didn't Moshe Rabbeinu, why isn't it its own book? And he's bringing a proof in Sefer Eov because I'll say that Moshe Rabbeinu wrote Sefer Eov, and that's also not literal according to most, or according to at least one shita. So I don't. Yeah.
Can you just say that Eov wasn't written with the same level of nevuah or something like that? Or
right, but I don't know why he's assuming that that's the case based on the fact that it's a mashal. In other words, why can't you say that he wrote this as that Moshe Rabbeinu, received this in the same nevuos Moshe as he did the rest of Torah, but it was given as a mashal, he makes it seem like one is contingent on the other, so maybe he's saying something like you are, Zev, but I don't see that as being compelling, or I don't understand his premises that he's not stating here. Okay. This next one is why Rabbi Chait says that you cannot take this as a mashal. Okay, and this is something that I've wanted to discuss with him. I have not gotten the chance. But if you listen to his shiur on the Nachash, there's a 2-part shiur in Chumash, in the Chumash section of the TTL on the Nachash, and he vehemently is against the notion that that Ma'aseh Bereshis is a mashal, or that the Gan Eden story is a mashal. And I just started listening over Sukkot to his shiur on Adam's complaints, Koheles' complaints and Adam's punishments, and he also goes on a whole thing there about how he holds that that it's not a mashal. Okay, so what he says is very much like what the Abravanel is about to say, and he really he's harsh here.
Can I ask a quick question to clarify?
Sure. Yeah.
You mentioned before that we're first learning the Abravanel's critique of the Ralbag, who says it's a mashal.
Yeah.
But he's not only critiquing the Ralbag, he's really criticizing everyone who says it's a mashal.
Yeah, Rambam, Ralbag, and Ibn Ezra, and he reserves most of his actual analysis for the Rambam.
Okay.
Yeah, but right now these are the things in common that he's critiquing them for. So he says like this: Umehem she'im natir lasos surah b'chelik hazeh. If we are permitted to make an allegory of this section, Ma'aseh Bereshis, of Ma'aseh Bereshis, ulahutzi haksuvim mipshutam, and to take the psukim out of their literal implication, ulahimashech achar hamuskal, and to follow after abstract concepts. Mi hamonea shenase gamkein surah b'melecha sheishes yamim. What's going to prevent us from saying that the 6 days of creation are a mashal? The nomar gamkein she'en makfi pshutam, to say that they're not according to their literal meaning. Ki zevzeh Ma'aseh Bereshis hein. Both of these are Ma'aseh Bereshis. This is not Rabbi Chait's argument, by the way. Sorry. Let me see.
Question.
Just 1 second. V'nis batla gamkein emunas. Sorry, he does say Rabbi Chait's thing. It's just not this one though. V'nis batla gamkein emunas chidush ha'olam shenilmon mipshatei haksuvim. And that's going to lead us to deny the creation of the world, which we learn out from the pshat of those psukim. So that's his other argument: is if you say that this is not literal and it's part of Ma'aseh Bereshis, so then you're going to say that the first part of Ma'aseh Bereshis is also not literal, and you're going to deny chidush olam. Yeah, what were you going to say, Zev?
No, never mind.
Okay.
I guess actually, yeah. That nowadays this question wouldn't have as much power.
It's a question.
Yeah,
of
I was actually going to ask that same question.
Right.
It seems like now this entire argument is undermined because we know that it was not literally 6 days.
Right. When you say this entire argument, you mean this third argument, right? The most recent one.
Yeah, but also the argument about the before being literal and after being literal, but this being figurative. That
So-
also.
I don't think that's undermined, and the reason for that is that argument is really talking about to use fancy terms, like a literary unity. Like if you're going to say that the entire Torah has factual narratives and this one thing is an allegorical narrative, then it doesn't fit. So let's say
No, we're not saying
you
that.
acknowledge that, like, let's say we said that the first part of mashal is also an allegorical. So it weakens the question, but I don't think it undermines it, because then you could say, well, why does the Torah start off with an allegory? If the rest of its stories are literal and if it's a seamless transition.
Yeah. Okay.
Right, but assuming we know the first part, like the 6 days, is allegorical, so then it wouldn't be crazy to say that the next part right after that is also
Right. It definitely makes it makes his Abravanel's case much weaker for that. Yeah. Okay. So then he says, Uma yashiv harav hamoreh kishiyitin adin lifnei ribono shel olam. So what is the Rambam going to respond when he's put on trial before God? Mi hitir lo lasos tzura b'ktsas ma'aseh breshis of b'ktsas lo. Right. So I guess this is part of the same question. Who permitted him to make a mashal out of part of ma'aseh breshis and not the other part? Im chashav machshava lasosa b'kala or b'kula. Did he think a thought to do this with all of it? I'm not sure what he means there. Okay, this one is now Rabbi Chait's objection. Umihem she'im natir haritzua, if you loosen the strap, okay, lasos tsura b'psukim, to make psukim into an allegory, olahotziam midei pshutam, and to remove them from their pshat, meaning, yischayv mimenu k'tzitza b'netioseha. Anyone know where that phrase comes from, uprooting the shoots?
Acher?
Yeah, that's Acher, right? So this is in the mashal of the Arba Shnichnas of the Pardes, that 4 went to Pardes, and that's the mashal of the orchard, which is metaphysics. And I always forget who did what. Ben Azai is the one who died, and Ben Zoma went crazy, or maybe Ben Azai went crazy and Ben Zoma died. And then Acher katzatz benetios, he uprooted the shoots, which is a mashal for heresy. Ki tispashet hatzara'as, because this tsaras will spread, okay? And he's talking about the methodological tsaras. V'tavo gam kein lasos tzura v'chikuim b'mitzvos haTorah chukoseha u'mishpateha. And then you're going to come to make an allegory and a mashal of the mitzvos of the Torah and its chukim and mishpatim. Ki im haya muter b'ktsasa, huter b'kula. Because if it's muter for some, then it's muter for everything. V'ech shov shasfeku shehigiu etzel harav hachasid, Rabbeinu Nisim heviuhu limanel milfarsh parsha hazos kilo atar koach neged bnei amo lafarsh al tzad hatzura. I don't know if this is which Rabbeinu Nisim this is. I don't know if this is like the Drashos Aran Rabbeinu Nisim or if this is the other Rabbeinu Nisim. But he's saying that he thinks that this is why these problems prevented the Ran from explaining the parsha this way. Kilo atar koach neged bnei amo, because he couldn't restrain the power against his nation. I mean, I think people would object. Lafarish al tzad hatzura. In other words, he couldn't be so brazen as to interpret it as an allegory. Ukfi pshuta lo yuchala, and he couldn't explain according to the pshat. V'yomer belibo eshmer alafi machsom. So he says, I'm just going to uphold a barrier. I'm not familiar enough with the Ron's commentary to know what he meant. So that's the third and most powerful question, which is a question in general, but it's all right. It's always a question according to everybody. How do you know when to take a pasuk literally and not? Okay, and I still think Sadigon has the best thing. I wrote that up in a blog post. Let me know if you're interested. It's a very simple 4 rules he has for when you take pasukim non-literally. So that's not a problem. But once you say that an entire part of the Torah, which is a narrative portion, is not literal, so then the question is, where do you stop? Okay, and what's going to prevent you from saying that other things like the Avos were a mashal, or the Shvatim, or Yetzias Mitzrayim. And famously, there were, over the weekend, I reread, did I have the book in here? No. I reread Rabbi Zucker's essay on the Maimonidean controversies, which can be found in the intro to the English book, the English translation of Amram ben Rambam's Milchamas Hashem. And he says that a lot of the Rambam's followers, not his like direct Talmidim, but the Maimonideans, did go so far as to claim that Abraham and Sarah were a mashal for form and matter, and like the 12 Shvatim were a mashal for the 12 zodiac signs, and that so that's like one instance of people taking it too far. And then contemporarily, I guess I won't say it because this is going to go on YouTube, but a prominent musmach of a relatively new yeshiva, not relatively new now, but like newer yeshiva, wrote a essay or article questioning whether Yetzias Mitzrayim was literal, and it's a real danger. Like once you say that a story in the Torah is not literal, where do you draw the line? And especially with this story, because this is not an isolated story, like let's say hypothetically, someone wanted to say that Sefer Yonah was a mashal. Okay, now I don't know. There are people who want to argue that there are that the Rambam holds that. I don't know if I'm convinced by that, but let's say you wanted to say that. So you could say that because it's one book and like it's in isolation, and you could say that like the author of the mashal used the mashal of Yonah and a real prophet and a real city, and like use that as a vehicle for mashal, just like Shlomo Melech used, the mashal of lovers in Shir Shirim for mashal for Avas Hashem. But the problem with this, what's the problem with taking this story as a mashal?
There's a lineage from him down to Moshe.
Yes, the lineage, right? Is that we trace the lineage from Adam through Shes to Noach, and then from Noach to Abraham. So the question is, what do you do in terms of that? Like, where do you draw the line, and then how do you explain the lineage? And this is not just a lineage that's found in the Torah. I mean, in Divrei Hayamim, which is I don't know how many people have looked at the beginning of Divrei Hayamim, but that's like where you find like a big lineage, and it indicates that Adam was a real person. So the Abravanel actually does take this up later on. Okay, we're not going to go through that, but he does take up an argument for where you would draw the line. So if you're interested, then you could look there. But that's another big problem. Okay, so those are the problems. Just to reiterate, there's the literary unity. There's taking part of Ma'aseh Bereshis literally and part of it figuratively, which, as we said, is not as much of a problem now. And then the third part is where do you draw the line? In terms of, is this going to lead you to interpret the mitzvos as non-literal or the other stories of the Torah as non-literal? I mean, it looks like the Abravanel puts the emphasis on the mitzvos. Rabbi Che put the emphasis on the other stories. And Rabbi Zucker did also in his essay.
Question.
Sure.
How would this be different than taking the Sheshme Bereshis non-literally? Okay. According to him, again, he's working with the premise that you take it literally. You take the Sheshme Bereshis literally, right? So that's why he's so disturbed by the fact that if you take one part of it literally, you're going to undo Brias Olam, So, but are you asking? You're asking according to those who would take that non-literally? Yeah.
I guess the only difference would be that that's not a historical narrative. That's not told as a historical narrative, with genealogies and such. So that would be the major problem, the major difference. I mean.
Okay.
Yeah, in either case, like he formulates them as two separate arguments.
Right.
The first problem being you're not going to take Ma'aseh Bereshis literally, and then you're not going to take other stories or mitzvahs literally, but it's basically, I think, the same argument.
Yeah. You think it's the same argument?
I think it's a very similar argument. Just the implications of each one is different.
Because he according to him, it's a big difference. According to us, it'd be more of a similar related argument.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So then the next part I wanted to read really quickly is he says, this is part where he's Malamed Zechus on the Rambam and others. Lo chen anochi imadi ki lo uchal himalet nechvus dei bazeh. So he says, I can't, I don't hold by them, and I can't refrain from sharing my opinion on them. V'rishona alamed zechus al harav ha'ochzim darcho. So I'm going to be Malamed Zechus on the Rambam and those who cling to his path, which presumably also includes the Ibn Ezra and the Ralbag. B'mesh pirshu haparsha b'derech tzuri v'hamsheli. I'll be Malamed on the fact that they take the story allegorically. So they never would dream of taking mitzvos non-literally. Okay, so he's admitting he's not saying it's a straw man. I mean, because in other words, he's making it clear he didn't actually think that the Rambam was going to take mitzvos non-literally. But I think, in other words, the objection still stands that a person might follow them and do that. But he's just saying that these Gedolim didn't do that. Anything that has an action, then they establish and accept it upon themselves and upon their offspring to keep and to do. And the Rambam also did not take Maaseh Bereshis and the 6 days non-literally in terms of the Chiddush Olam. Now, again, I think the Rambam, I don't think that that's accurate. I think there's arguments for saying that the Rambam did take that non-literally, but I don't feel qualified to really assess that. Aval b'sipurei atze hagan v'yitiras ha'isha umin hatzela. I assume that's also a typo. There should be Yitziras Ha'isha min hatzela. V'divrei hanachash mala'u libo l'hotzia midei pshutam. They were brazen to remove them from their pshat. Okay, so he's clarifying basically that the Rambam and the Ralbag and Ibn Ezra only limited themselves to the Gan Eden story. Okay, then he goes on and he starts analyzing the Rambam and does a whole long analysis. And the only other part, I'm just showing you how long it is. The only thing I wanted to read, just because I think you'd be curious, is what is the Abravanel's approach? Okay, so I just wanted to read that just to show that he has his own approach, which I think is a good approach. Al-Kain Amarti Derech HaMelech Ne'el. He says, therefore I say we're going to go on the king's path, the royal road. Lo nata yaminu small. We're not going to go to the right or the left. Mipshat HaKsuvim, from the pshat of the psukim, lahatzdikam u'amsam, to justify them and to verify them. So he's saying, aside from writing the story in the Torah for its pshat value, it's also teaching us chachma and das and yiras Hashem. V'zehu ha'yisron ha'nifla ha'nimshal l'Torah's ha'elokim al chiburei ha'chachmos v'hanimusim. This is the advantage. This is not Koheles Yisron. The advantage of the wondrous advantage that is found in the Torah of God over the other compositions of Chachma and systems. Some of them are only surface level and they don't have any deeper allusion to another science. I think it's supposed to be rake, not ra. And some of them only have an internal content and the external is completely empty and there's no substance. V'zosa Torah asher sam Moshe ena kain. But the Torah that Moshe gave us is not like this. V'hachitzoni mimenu hu ha'amiti. So the external is true. And it happened like it did. V'hanirmaz hi chachma elyona. But the thing that's alluded to it is a wondrous chachma, a high chachma. Ukvar zachar harav hamora zeh b'hakdamas sifro. The Rama mentions this in the Hakdama to the Mora. Behavi al zeh ma'amar shlomo. And he brought about this, the statement of Shlomo, which I've quoted before in another shiur about the difference between my approach and Rabbi Zimmer's approach to Mishlei. Tapuche zahav b'maskios kesef. It is golden apples encased in silver. Davar alafanav. So is a statement said in its proper ways. That's a quote from Mishlei. Meaning that the outside is a silver casing, which has value, but the inside is gold, which has more value. That's the hidden meaning. How could we not say that the Torah itself is of this quality that has a nistar that's pnimi? In other words, if Shlomo is talking about general chachamim and their statements that they have external and internal meaning, kal v'chomer the Torah itself. And Chazal were excessive in taking these things allegorically and figuratively. Okay, but he's saying that they took them allegorically and figuratively by saying that the outside is true, but the inside has a deeper meaning. Okay, and then he says, and same thing with the Bali Kabbalah. Okay, and so his approach to the book, if you're interested in it, he goes through a complete explanation of it on a pshat level, and then he goes through a complete explanation of Gan Eden on a literal level. And again, long commentary. This is just on Perik Sheni, and then Perik Shlishi. Perik Shlishi in the Abravanel is, I believe, even longer. Okay, so if you're interested in that, then go ahead and have fun. But please, for your own sake, use an Abravanel with bullet points and paragraph breaks so you can like navigate your way through, because you're not going to go through this whole chunk of text. All right, so there that takes care of the intro to the Ralbag. Any questions about the his objections? All righty, let us dive. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, not necessarily a question to the objection, but just really a question of his premise.
Sure.
Just you mentioned that there's controversy as to whether the Rambam takes the story literally or allegorically.
Yeah.
What's the like basic controversy there?
He talks about that. About, you know, because the Rambam basically there's a section in the Mora, and I always forget which. I mean, he quoted it. It's in Chelek Rishon and part of the second Chelek, I think, where he speaks cryptically, saying he's going to take Chazal's. Hold on, let me see if I can find it. I know we're not going to go through the whole thing, obviously, but I just want to see if I can find the that part. Hold on, because I remember the I remember the Mishlei pasuk he quotes. So that's how I'm finding it. Hold on, just looking on alatorah.org. Machshava Rambam Mor Nevuchin. Yeah, okay, so I found it. Let me just share the screen again. Oopsies. Oh, wait, sorry. Just 1 second. I just clicked on the wrong thing. Mor Nevuchin. All right, whatever. I'm going to share the screen anyway. So he says like this. Zos ha-hagdama. All right, so he's going to have an introduction here. He shekol mash niskar b'ma'aseh Bereishis b'Torah eno kulo al pshuto kafi mash yidmu mimeno hahamon. So, how would you translate that?
Wait, where is it?
In Mor Nevuchin Beis Chavtes, and I'll highlight it on the thing. Sorry, Shekol Mash Nizkar B'Maaseh Bereishis B'Torah Eno Kulo Al Pshuto Kfi Masha Yidmu Mimeno Hahamon. While you think about that, I just want to look at. You can answer. I just want to get my other translations of the Mor Nevuchin. What do you say?
Is he's talking about Gan Eden here? Is
Kol Mash and Nizkar B'Maaseh Bereishis. He's going to answer the question later on about what he's talking about. But just how do you translate that phrase here? Let me just see if I can give you another version of this in the Kafach. Just 1 second. Flipping through this. This is 229. Wait a minute, what's going on here? This is like 5 paragraphs from the end. Okay, is this the same? Shekol ma shenizkar b'Torah b'Maaseh Bereishis ein kulo kipshuto kafi ma shemadamet b'Hamon. So very similar. So everything in Maaser Bereshit is not entirely according to the Pshat. So is he saying that the entirety of Maaser Bereshit is not according to the Pshat, or is he saying that of the entire Maaser Bereshit, that not all of it is according to the Pshat? You got the pines there, Zev?
Yeah. Where? No. Yeah. Where in the chapter is it?
It's towards the end. I don't. It seems like there are different paragraph breaks. Mine says. Oh, sorry, I'm on the wrong part.
Oh yeah, I got it.
It's on like somewhere on 346, right?
Yeah, it's at the very bottom. It's like the last
yeah.
4 lines or something.
Yeah, I got it. Thanks. Yeah. Not everything mentioned in the Torah concerning the account of the beginning is to be taken in its external sense as the vulgar imagine. Yeah. Okay. So sounds like he's saying that not all of it is literal. Okay. She'ilu haya inyan kain lo hayu. You know what, Zev? If you got the pines there, I'm just going to read it in Hebrew, and then you correct me if I say something that is radically different.
Okay.
Ilu haya inyan kain. If that were so, in other words, if the entire thing were literal. Lo hayu mastirim oso anshe hachachma. So the anshe hachachma would not have concealed it. V'lo hayu hachachamim mamritzim melitos b'ha'alimo umenias hasipur bo bifnei ha'hamon. And they wouldn't have, I don't know what mamritzim melitos is. They wouldn't have made allegories in hiding.
Yeah, expatiated on its being kept secret or preventing the talk about it.
Yeah. So what he's talking about here is the fact that Chazal, there are actual halachos in the beginning, or the Mishnah at the beginning of the second chapter of Chagiga, regarding how you are allowed to teach Maaser Bereshis and Maaser Merkava. So he's saying, if the whole thing is just able to be taken literally, so then why or how could they hide it? So the very fact that there are these halachos, that they're hiding it and they're using these mashalim to conceal it, means that the literal thing is not that the literal thing is not the real meaning. Okay.
I don't understand that point. Why can't it be like the Abravanel says, that the shot is true, but then there's also a deeper nister meaning, and then that nister is what's being hidden and what has the laws preventing its teaching?
Good question.
I mean, also, it's not insane to read the Rambam like that. It's not crazy for him to be saying that.
Right. I mean, well, it depends on how much you read into him saying that it's not according to its pshat. Actually, let's read the Rambam. Let's read the paragraph first, okay? Because his next argument is against that. Ki hapshutim hahem mivim im lehefsed dimion gadol v'harkavas deus raus b'chok ha'eloka o lebitul gamor ukfir b'yesodei haTorah. So if you take the pshat, if you take it literally, so then it'll bring people to deficient imaginations or like fantasies, and the I don't know why he uses harkava. I don't know if he's using it in the sense of like what do you call it, like kilaim, like crossbreeding, of evil opinions about God's ability or his properties, so to speak, or to complete denial of the Yesodei Torah. So he's saying. I think he's saying two arguments here. He's saying, number one, if this whole thing is according to the pshat, like the Homo imagine it, so then what's all this stuff about the Chachamim hiding it? And then the second thing is the pshat itself will lead you to false ideas in the Yesodei Torah. V'hanachon lazov l'harchik b'chinasam b'dimion levad v'hanatiyam min hachachmos v'lo k'moshi yaseh hadarshanim hamafarshim ha'inyanim asher yechashvu. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, Zev, can you just read this in
yeah. Okay, the correct thing to do is to refrain, if one lacks all knowledge of the sciences, from considering these texts merely with the imagination. One should not act like the wretched preachers and commentators who think that a knowledge of the interpretation of words is science, and in whose opinions wordiness and length of speech add to perfection.
Yeah.
Check you go.
So not quite yet. So it sounds like when he's saying taking them literally, it sounds like he really means like trying to derive the meaning of it from the words exclusively, the same way that we do with like the rest of Torah B'Ksav, you know? And to me, the greatest example of this that I saw with my own eyes is in my early years in yeshiva, then 2 first-year yeshiva guys sat down with a Chumash with just the psukim and dictionaries, and started trying to figure out the first parak of Beraishis, like not just trying to translate it, but like I asked them what they were doing, and they were actually trying to like learn it, you know. And Rambam is saying like, if you think that you could do that about Maaseh Beraishis, then you're sorely mistaken, you know. Maybe you can get there from other stuff.
Is this like, do you know the Drush Saran? He has like a whole thing on Maaseh
right on the
Beraishis.
first
Is that,
drasha, right?
Is that what he's talking about, or is that what he said?
No, I think that's what the Abravanel was talking about, that the Ron kind of hedges his bets, right? Like he doesn't say it's entirely literal, but he also doesn't want to say that it's a mashal.
Right.
I don't remember it enough to evaluate. Let me just finish up till here, till the end of this paragraph here. Of amnam bechinasam ba'amitis hasechal, ba'amitas hasechal, achar hashlemus v'chachmos hamofsim yedias hasodos hanuvayos, he says, in other words, the true meaning can only be discerned if you have familiarity, perfection in the sciences, the demonstrative sciences, and knowledge of prophetic sodos. Okay, so that's really what you need in order to be able to access this. I've said that many times in the Pirush Mishnah. There he's talking, I believe, about Chagiga 2:1. Here we go. And in the explanation of from the beginning of the book until now, Kavod Elokim Haster Davar, it is the glory of God to conceal a matter. And this is stated after it is mentioned Bayom Hashishi. Okay, so this is the cause of confusion here. And this is getting back to Joe's question here, is Rambam seems to be saying that everything from Maaseh Beraishis through Yom Shishi is like fair game in terms of it not being according to the pshat and it being allegorical. But the question is, what happened on Yom Shishi, right? Because you have the Chazal that say that the entire Gan Eden episode happened on Yom Hashishi, right? So is that included in what the Rambam is saying is a mashal, or does he literally mean until Yom Hashishi, like in the Psukim, which is at the end of what we call the first parak of Beraishis, you know? And secondarily, there are a lot of the events, or not a lot of the events, but let's take, for example, Cain and Hevel, okay? Were they born after Adam and Chava got kicked out of Gan Eden, like the Pshat of the Psukim seems to indicate, or were they born in Gan Eden, like some Chazal seem to be to indicate? So that throws into question, are Cain and Hevel part of this mashal or not, you know? So, so Joe, that's where it's murky, because he clearly is saying that parts of Maaseh Beraishis are not to be understood literally, but it's unclear what the parts are. And then the rest of the chapter, what he does, not just the rest of the chapter, but I think the next chapter maybe, he says, I'm just going to take Divrei Chazal and arrange them for you without explaining stuff. And that's where the Rambam's Pirush on like Gan Eden is found, but it's all in veiled form that even he's not explaining. So I don't know about controversy, but that's where controversy would arise, of disagreement as to what the Rambam does and doesn't take literally. Alrighty. Ready for Ralbag? Okay. So I will be using this PDF I made of the green Ralbag. And I guess for those who, since this is, I guess, technically a new unit, this is the Ralbag that you want. Okay, this is the good Ralbag. And we're going to be using the footnotes. So he has, just to explain the organization here. So maybe I said this before, but he divides up the Parshios not by the Sedra division and not by the Christian chapters. He makes his own halakim. So this is Chelek Ches, okay, which is saying something if like Beraishis Aleph through Beis Gimel is like, there's 7 halakim there. I don't remember how he divides it exactly, but okay, so he says like this. Umehena naschil levaer mashin nimshach lazeh b'Torah misipur sodos hametzios. So now we will continue to explain what follows in the Torah of the account of the secrets of existence. Great tagline. Va'anachnu misnatzlim tchila. We must excuse ourselves from the outset. Im lo yimatzu devarenu ba maskimin lepshate haksuvim al haofen shenimsu maskimin lelashon haTorah ba mesha kadam lanu mehabir. So we got to excuse ourselves if you do not find our words to be as closely fitting with the pshat as they were in what came before this. Okay, what I mean by that is, I know I asked you this before. Gerard or Gerald Schroeder?
Gerald.
Gerald, okay. You know what, I'll tell you, this was in my, I discovered him in the part of my journey to Judaism when we were moving to Seattle, and the conductor of the Seattle Symphony is Gerard Schroeder. And I had learned the two names simultaneously, and so I can never remember which one's the conductor and which one's like the science guy. So the science guy Schroeder, unless he's changed his opinion, from what I remember of him in the early 2000s, is he really does try to explain it so that you can read the text of Beraishis and it correlates to scientific truth. Is that an accurate description? So the Ralbag, that's what the Ralbag tried to do, is he wanted to, obviously with Aristotelian physics, is he wanted to make it so that you can read the pshat of the psukim and see that it's talking about these Aristotelian physics and metaphysical concepts. So he says that was very nice for the first part of Beraishis, and like he's kind of like indirectly patting himself on the back, saying that like we did a good job making our commentary match the pshat of the psukim, but we got to excuse ourselves here. You're not going to find that in Gan Eden. Okay, why? Because these matters which follow, meaning Gan Eden, husmu batorah ne'elamim me'od. They were placed into the Torah in a very obscure or concealed manner. B'mashalim chazake ha'he'elam v'ha'hester. In extra strong hideaway mashalim. Okay, so like you've got your mashalim that are like for poetic reasons, or you've got your like accessible mashalim. Then you've got your mashalim that are designed to conceal and to obscure, and that's what these are. Okay. So what does he hold that this is about? And by the way, you can see from here at the top, this is from Perik Beis Pasuk Daled through Gimel Chaf Daled. Okay, that's everything he's saying now is about that section. Okay, so here's now where he states his thesis. Okay, what is the purpose of this mashal? Hatachli samahuvan bo, the intended purpose in this mashal, lefiha nira lanu, according to what we think, who is Lahodia hakelim asher nasan Hashem yis'ala la'adam lahagio el hatzlachas hanefesh asher ba yihiu lo hachaim hanitzchim, is to teach us about the faculties or the tools that God gave to man, which bring him to success of the soul, through which he attains eternal life. So that's the subject, is a mashal for the faculties of the soul and how they bring you to eternal life. Okay. All right. Now, it's very fitting, by the way, not to spoil it. Did anything jump to your mind immediately that supports the Ralbag's interpretation that that's the purpose of the Gan Eden story, that it's to teach you how to get eternal life?
That the punishment is death.
Okay. That is definitely a good clue. Yeah, that is definitely a good clue. I was thinking of something else. How does it end? How does the Gan Eden story end?
He says we have to make sure that they don't eat from the tree of life, lest they live forever.
Exactly. Is that God says we have to make sure that they don't eat from the tree of life and live forever, and then he gets kicked out of Gan Eden in order to not eat from the tree of life. So Gan Eden is about eating from the tree of life, which he's saying means eternal life. Okay. This is going to become clear later on, by the way, but he holds like the Rambam in terms of the Olam Haba, that it's non-physical. Okay. So when he says eternal life, he does not mean eternal life in this world. He means in non-physical Olam Haba. All right. So that's what he holds the stories about. Okay. So now he starts going into his explanation, but we may have to take a detour. Okay, how familiar are you with the faculties of the soul according to Aristotle? And by that I mean the Rambam in the first parak of Shmona Prakim.
I the Rambam in the first paragraph of Perakim. I don't know Aristotle, but
I
Okay.
literally read it
they're saying
today.
it's similar.
Oh, you read it today. Okay.
Yeah.
So I guess maybe what we'll do is instead of spending our time there, let me just review it ball peh. I have it all queued up to go in case we want to read any of it. And in fact, we will have to make recourse to some parts of it because what do you call it? It is oh, you know what? I'll just do it ball peh as I do this on the screen. Okay. So he holds that there are 5 parts of the soul, right? First part is the chelek hazan. I also want to show you, if you're going to use any translation of the Shemona Perakim, this is, I found to be the best one. So this is published by, what is this, Torah Press?
That's the Feldman one?
This is the Feldman one, yeah.
Yeah, I have that one.
Yeah. So the good thing about this is that it has the Kophic translation, which again, you know me, that's the best translation, into Hebrew. And then his English translation is like very good, in so much so that like I have this neuroses that if I'm making any sort of PowerPoint or Word document, I have to translate everything on my own. And I find that like I will make my own translation and then update it based on his, because his is better than like I can do. And then it's got good footnotes and it also has like elaborations in the back. So it's just a very, very good translation. And he knows what he's talking about also, which always helps if you're making commentary. Okay, so he says there's the chelek hazan, the nutritive faculty, which is it's interesting. He calls it the digestive system, but like I think and that's a good translation of the Rambam. I think it's better to think of it as like the physiological component of the organism. Okay, so regulating all the physiology. The second one is the chelek hamargish, the sensory aspect, the sensory faculty, which is what Aristotle considered the 5 senses. Again, we know now that there are more than 5 senses. Sorry, Aristotle. Then the chelek hamadame, okay, the imaginative faculty.
Wait, what? What are the other senses?
Oh, I got a Wikipedia article for you.
Like
I'll give you some examples just so you know, right? Weight. Okay, if you're holding something in your hand, you can feel how heavy it is, and that is a sense, and it's not the sense of touch, right? It's a separate sense. Or space. I forgot if they divide these into 2, but your bodily, your ability to close your eyes and find your nose, right? That's also something, bodily spatial, I'm not sure what that is. There's a whole Wikipedia article on like what the senses are, and like they've expanded it beyond the 5. So it's an interesting article. Yeah.
It's weird because Aristotle would probably agree that you have those.
Right, but the definition of
up
sense,
for
I think, has to be expanded, and he might have tried to like put them all into one of those 5 into those 5 sentences. All right, now this one we do need to read because this is going to be a key player in the Gan Eden story. Okay, I'll just read the English here. The imagination, the imaginative faculty, koach hamadame, encompasses the capacity to retain impressions of experiences when they have vanished from the senses involved, and to compound some and separate others. It is the capacity that enables a person to combine certain experiences he has had along with others he never had nor could grasp. For example, to imagine an iron ship sailing in the air, or an individual whose head is in the heavens while his feet are on the ground, or an animal with 1,000 eyes, as well as many other such impossible things that are bred when the imagination combines things and produces a phantasm. So whenever Rav Pesach teaches this, he always says that don't read this and think, oh, Rambam couldn't imagine, didn't think airplanes were possible, but no, he says a ship sailing in the air, which means like floating like it does on where's the Hebrew here? Shata, does it say Shata? Ratza ba'avir. All right, Ratza is not so good. There's no translation to Shata, but so this is like the analogy I use here is this is like the imagination is like Photoshop, right? Is Photoshop, Adobe Photoshop, you cannot generate photographs with it. You have to import the photographs, but then once you import it, you can manipulate it and resize it and combine it and recolor it and all that other stuff. So too, the koach hamadame, the imaginative faculty, takes the sense impressions that you see, and then it can edit them at will to make things that don't actually exist or that you've never seen before. So that's the imaginative faculty. Okay. The next one is the most complicated one, I think, in terms of grasping it as a unity. Oh, sorry. We'll skip the metukolimim. Oh, no, we won't. That is where the mutakelimun Mitukalamim. I think
Hardest
Mitukalamim
word
is-
to read.
What to call
Yeah.
them?
Say again?
Call them?
No, I think it's Mitukalamim because that's the shorish for speakers in Arabic. Kalam or I don't know what the Shorashim system is. That is where the Mitukalamim made their great. With my students in my EOF class, when we get to this, then I just tell them to call them the. We have nicknames for all of them because there's also the Mutazilites. So that one we call the mozzarellas, and the Mitukalamim we call the. I forgot what we call the Mitukalamim, but it's easier to come up with nicknames. Like that's the advice they give. I've never read a Russian novel, but they say that all of the names in Russian novels are so complex that you just have to like come up with like nicknames that are funny and amusing so that you can remember them better. So that is where the Mitukalamim made their great absurd mistake, upon which was built an erroneous basis about the differences between what is essential, meaning what is necessarily so, what is possible, i.e. what may or may not be so, and what is impossible, i.e. what simply cannot be so. They themselves believed or convinced others to believe that whatever can be imagined is possible. They did not realize that the imagination can concoct impossible things, as we have said. All right, so that mistake is going to come back in the Gan Eden story, thinking that whatever can be imagined must be a possibility to exist.
Question.
Yeah.
When he says is a possibility to exist, does he mean like physical possibility or logical possibility?
I think, let's see what the footnote says. I don't know. Where was footnote? Or maybe, sorry, that's a footnote in the back of the book, 13. Let me just look it up really quickly. 13 in chapter 1. Footnote says, i.e., that we should take the conceivable or what may or may not be so as seriously as we take the actual. And he references us to the Mora Nevuchim 173, 10th proposition, also the Mora Nevuchim 149 and 315. Gotta love good footnote, people. Okay, then he says, after all, as we put it today, who knows, it just might be. In fact, we apparently take that very much to heart in modernity. A contemporary advertiser crows, we believe that if it can be imagined, it can be done, in keeping with this very old error in logic. But often, as the expression goes, reality beckons, and we come to realize that not everything that can be imagined can be, other than virtually. I don't know what he means by that. I think he means in our imagination. He goes on a little bit. Yes, I'm not sure, but I think what he means, I think that characterization was accurate, is that they accorded a degree of reality, instead of just realizing that it only exists in the mind. And that caused them to posit a bunch of other things. Yeah, Joe?
Yeah, question on this point. Does he mean like it, whatever they like the erroneous belief was that it's like naturally possible? Meaning, for example, like let's say there was no makas dam, and I was like, I'm imagining rivers that are flowing with water that turned into blood. Obviously, you'd say, okay, it's an imagination, that's impossible,
Right.
But it happened.
Yeah, I don't know what he means because yeah, I don't know what he means. And if need be, we can look into those chapters in the Mora that he referenced. I don't really want to speculate about it right now. Okay, so that's the imagination. All right, this next part is the hardest part, I think, to understand. Hachel hamis orer. So he says the emotions. I think if you were to translate it, so I think you need to appreciate that the word emotion and the word motion is the same. Okay, or it comes from the same shoresh, and you'll see it from his description here. The emotions encompass the capacity to either crave something or despise it. I think here I would use the terms to desire or reject, or attraction and repulsion. I think are the better things here. He says that actually. They are the capacity that enables a person to seek something out or to avoid it, to be sympathetic towards something or have reservations about it. This is an interesting model of the emotions, by the way, that he's going to go on to say that all of the emotions fit into one of those two categories, that when you are in the grips of an emotion, it's either bringing you towards something or away from it. And he gives a bunch of examples. They include anger and desire, fear and heroism, cruelty and compassion, love and hatred, and many of the other incidentals of the nefesh. So that's the emotive faculty. In fact, all the parts of the body serve as agents of these capacities of the nefesh, i.e. the emotions, including the hands, with their ability to act, the feet with their ability to walk, the eyes with their ability to see, and the heart with its ability to either be brave or fearful. The same goes for all other external and internal organs and their functions. They all serve as agents of the emotions. Yeah, and again, the reason why I don't like the word emotions here is it's broader than the emotions. Like, really all motion, not emotion, all motion is generated by this faculty, meaning that the mind itself cannot propel the organism to do or not do something. And neither can the nutritive aspect. For example, if you're hungry, if your stomach needs food, you know, it has to send a signal to you that then makes you crave food and move towards it. So it has to interact with the koach hamisorer in order to actually get you to move, all right? Or if your mind recognizes that this is a dangerous thing, recognizing the danger doesn't move you. What moves you is the koach hamisorer. So that's why I don't like calling it just the emotions. I like the maybe emotive faculty is enough of a different way to phrase it that like allows us to realize that it like is responsible for motion. Okay. And then last is the intellect. We read this earlier in the Rambam Bakiyush here, I think. And the intellect encompasses the human capacity to reason, speculate, acquire knowledge, and differentiate between good and bad actions. Some of its functions are practical and others are speculative. Practical functions are either mechanical or conceptual. The speculative ones touch upon our awareness of the nature of the immutables, which are called the sciences. Mechanical functions include the capacity to acquire skills like carpentry, agriculture, medicine, or navigation, and the speculative ones touch upon the capacity to think about doing something that one would like to do, when he wants to do it, whether it is feasible to do it or not, and if so, how to do it. So in other words, you've got the theoretical part of the intellect and the practical part. And the practical part, the theoretical one is the one that understands ideas for the sake of their, for their own sake, right? Just abstract ideas per se. And then the practical part is mastering crafts and then implementing practical decisions or crafts. All right, so those are the faculties of the soul. Okay, and we're gonna familiarize ourselves with these more through the Ralbag. But any just questions on like what the basics are here?
This might be unrelated. Do you know what his definition of the nefesh is?
The Rambams or the Ralbags? Rambams. So he talked about it earlier in the chapter because he makes it clear that these are what do you call it? That some people say that there are 5 souls instead of 5 faculties. And he also talks about how we use the term nefesh to describe what the animals have also. And that's an equivocal usage. So he read chapter 1 again to see what how the Rambam is using it here. But then also be aware that when the Rambam uses the word nefesh elsewhere, then he says you got to infer it from context. So like in the Mishnah Torah, he says it's the Tzelem Elokim, and in like other contexts, it's just the physiology or like the life force, So, yeah. Okay. Back to the Ralbag. Here we go. So he's going to now give a summary of the contents of the nimshal, okay? He's not going to go through the mashal. So for that, we'd have to go through the actual commentary on Berashit. He's going to give you like an overview so that you know the concepts that the story is going to be alluding to. Vihi, shekvar nisbar b'sefer hanefesh. So Aristotle wrote in the book on the soul, Ki hasechel ha'enushi arum mitchilas habria mikol hamuskalos asher yasigim. By the way, as we go through this, you'll see he uses the language of the mashal, right? So he says arum is naked. So he's using that like to kind of like wink at you to see that that you can see where the mashal is going to fit in. So he says the human soul, the human intellect is naked at the time of its creation from all concepts that it will grasp. Okay, so unlike who famously held that the soul is born with all of the concepts already in it? And Plato, right, exactly. So Aristotle disagreed with Plato on this matter. Aristotle held that the soul acquires them. Okay, and he'll say that now. V'haseichel hapoal hu asher yashpia lo hamuskalos be'emtzaos hachushim. All right, so the active intellect, the old AI, okay, the old school AI, that is the thing that bestows the concepts by means of the senses and the imaginative faculty and the memory faculty. Now, pause here. What's your current understanding of the active intellect?
Pesach holds it's wrong.
Yeah, revolution. Yeah, Rapesa holds it's wrong. But what is the active intellect? What was the Aristotelian belief? Good, because I don't know either. No, all I know is the definition that they give in the Ralbagian dictionary at the back of that volume, which conveniently they replicate down here in footnote 2. Okay, so here's what he says. Ha'achron shebaskalim hanivdalim. So this is the active intellect is the last of the separate intellects. So brief thing with according to the Ram here, or according to like Aristotelian metaphysics, you've got 10 levels of angels, and the last one is the active intellect. Okay, the one that's closest to man, and the Ram says that that's why it's called Ishim, and that's why it's called by the name of Ish. Okay, nosein hatsurus b'chomerim. It endows matter with form. Umotzi seichel ha'adam min ha'koach el ha'poal. And it brings the intellect of man from potentiality to actuality. So those are the two functions, and that's what we need to know to have a working definition of the active intellect. Is the active intellect is that which is responsible for the forms in matter on earth, and it's the thing that causes your mind to go from a state of potential knowing to actual knowing. And just to elaborate on that, to the extent of my Aristotelian knowledge here, in order, let me think how to say it here. Okay, the very concept. Okay, let's use a mashal that I read from that one other guy, Edward Fesser. So he says that, let's say, for example, you have a cup, a pot of water. Okay, so that water is cold, but it's potentially hot. Okay, so how would you actualize the potential of hotness in the water? Fire. So you would need something hot in order to actualize the potential for hotness in something that's not hot. Okay, and that's a very basic concept in Aristotle of potentiality, is that potentiality can only be brought into actuality by something that itself is actual. All right, so the question is, when the human mind that potentially can know all concepts, when it doesn't have those concepts, what is it that brings your mind from a state of potential knowing to actual knowing? That's the active intellect. Okay, so active here should not be understood in the sense of active and passive, even though you can understand it that way because it's acting on your intellect, but active in the sense that it brings into actuality the passive concepts the potential concepts in your mind. Okay, so that's our working definition of the active intellect. I'm fairly confident that we're actually not going to need to go that much into it to understand the Ralbag, but he basically holds that if you just had your intellect, the human intellect, you would not be able to get any concepts from the physical world. What you need is the active intellect, which is, again, a malach, and the active intellect is the thing that is responsible for putting all forms into matter. So it has all the forms in it, and therefore, just like only fire, which has heat, can bring out the quality of heat in your own pot of water, so too only the active intellect that has all concepts in it can actualize the concepts in your mind. So that's how you gain knowledge. Okay, so I know that's not like fully comprehensible, but like is something registering in your mind?
Yeah.
All right, so that was the active intellect that causes registering in your mind. Okay. Yeah.
Is there an analog to like how like nowadays?
According to Rapesach, no.
Right.
Yeah, according to Rapesach, no, and I have not seen one either. But I'll tell you this though, experientially it is true. Okay, that how would I put it? Like when there's a coincidence that let me think this is actually true, or if this is just total nonsensical thing that I'm about to say. Hold on.
Say it anyway.
And preserve it for all eternity on YouTube. No. Nah, I need to review it before I say it because it involves yeah, I gotta think about it some more. I'm not aware of any corollary. And in fact, not only am I not aware of any corollary, but the hold on, let me just go get the books here. I'll be right back. So in Mortimer Adler's Aristotle for Everybody, where he takes Aristotelian concepts and translates them into understandable terms that are as relevant today as they were back then. He doesn't touch the active intellect. And in his other book, hold on, I'll be right back. So in his, this is the only book on angelology I own. And yes, angelology is a real thing, the angels on us. So this is another Adler book. So he has an extensive treatment of Aristotelian idea of angels, and yet he does not mention the active intellect, to my knowledge. So I don't know. So in other words, like, he's my only hope in terms of, like, not my only hope, my biggest hope in terms of understanding, like, Aristotle for Everybody. And he's not translated into a modern corollary. So on that basis, I'm assuming that there's no modern corollary. Isaac, of course, the bookmark that I would use in the angels.
That makes sense.
For us. All right. Anyway, so Zev, that's the answer to your question. I don't know if there's a corresponding thing.
Okay, but it's still, I guess, I'm assuming it's still beneficial to go through Ralbag.
So that's what so here's the thing. I'm pretty sure that his account of Gan Eden does not rely on the active intellect, except maybe at the very end. So I know that the ideas that he's saying are relevant, and I don't think the active intellect plays a big role in the Gan Eden story. So yes, what we're going to do is going to be valuable, I think, even though the active intellect is not something that we hold by.
Got it. Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Not according to the Abravanel, though.
Right. Well, here's the thing. The Abravanel would say that the ideas that the Ralbag are saying are good, just that that's not what the Torah is teaching. Yeah.
Yeah, fair.
Okay. So he says this now. He says, oh, so now let's go through, hold on a second. I forgot if he explains this or here, or if he explains this later on. Okay, so I'm going to give a little explanation now. Very little explanation here. So he says, the intellect is blank at the beginning of its inception, and it gets through the means of the senses and the imagination and the koach hazocher. Okay, so basic understanding of how it works is like this, is, again, Plato held that all of the forms are really in the soul, okay, or all knowledge is really in the soul, and you when you're learning, you're really recollecting it, okay? Aristotle held that that you start off where the soul, this intellect has no ideas, and then through sense impressions and through repeated sense impressions, which are stored in the memory, you get a sort of, I guess, perceptual abstraction, which then serves as the first principles by which you acquire all other knowledge. So in other words, the building blocks of being able to abstract ideas with your mind, the building blocks are via the senses and the memory and the imagination. And then from those, then you can then go and abstract knowledge from your mind. Okay. Again, these are all concepts, by the way, that, like, Aristotle wrote entire books on. So I'm not expecting to be able to get it from this, and neither is the Ralbag. He's just doing an overview here. Okay. V'zos ha'hashpa'a asher yashpia lo b'hodas sodos ha'metzius ha'amukim. This influence that the active intellect influences us in terms of the secrets of existence that are deep. And by, remember, secrets, he means like abstract concepts. Tidme lebarak o lelahat acherev hamishapeches sheyotzit pa'am v'yalim pa'am. So in other words, the real deep insights into the universe is comparable to a flash of lightning or to the flame of a rotating sword. Just a random mashal that he uses there. Sheyotzitz pam v'yalen pam, that flashes a little bit and then is concealed a little bit, okay? The Rambam gives this mashal in the Mora Nevuchim. Oh, he says it here. Hold on just a second. Oh, he says, why? Mipnei koshi ha-hisbodedus asher yitztarach l'seichel ha'enushi mibein shar kochos ha'nefesh bezeh ha'ofen meha-hasaga. Due to the difficulty of there's a better word than seclusion, but isolation, then isolating the intellect from the other faculties of the soul in this method of in this manner of apprehension. Like we explained in shiur shiurim, which Ralbag holds that all of shiur shiurim is a guide on how to arrive at Avas Hashem through science and mathematics and all the other studies of the natural world. Very elaborate mashal. Ukvar zachar ze harav b'more gamkim b'sifro hanechbar. Sorry, harav hamor gamkim b'sifro mora hanevuchim. So I just want to read to you from the Rambam there, footnote 4, which is, where does it say footnote 4? Oh, did I miss it? Oh, it's in the Psicha. Hold on just one second here. Yeah, so the Rambam is talking here about how difficult it is to gain knowledge, but also like how there are different levels of nevuah. And he says, oh yeah, here we go. He says, so he's talking about the secrets of existence, the deepest ideas. He says, you should not think that these great secrets are fully and completely known to everyone among us. They are not. But sometimes the truth flashes out to us so that we think it is day, and then matter and habit in their various forms conceal it, so that we find ourselves again in an obscure night, almost as we were at first. We are like someone in a very dark night over whom lightning flashes time and time again. Among us, there is one for whom the lightning flashes time and time again, so that he is always, as it were, in unceasing light. Thus night appears to him as day. This is the degree of the great one among the prophets, to whom it was said, but as for thee, stand thou here by me, and of whom it was said that the skin of his face sent forth beams, and so on. So that's Moshe Rabbeinu. Among them, there's one to whom the lightning flashes only once in the whole of his night. That is the rank of those of whom it is said, they prophesied, but they did so no more. There are others between whose lightning flashes there are greater or shorter intervals. Thereafter comes he who does not attain a degree in which the darkness is illumined by any lightning flash. It is illumined, however, by a polished body or something of that kind, stones or something else that give light in the darkness of the night. So smartphone, basically. And even this small light that shines over us is not always there, but flashes and is hidden again, as if it were the flaming sword that turned every way. It is in accord with these states that the degrees of the perfect vary. As for those who never once see a light, but grope around in the night, of them it is said, they know not, neither do they understand, they go about in darkness. The truth, in spite of the strength of its manifestation, is entirely hidden from them, as it is said of them, and now men see not the light which is bright in the skies. They are the vulgar among the people, and there's no occasion to mention them here in this treatise. So in other words, truth equals light, okay? And the influence of matter and habit, okay, meaning the corporeal elements of yourself, which include basically the 4 elements of your soul, the nutritive, the emotive, the sensory, and the other one, and the imagination, right? So those the influences of those are like darkness. So he's basically saying, if you're Moshe Rabbeinu, so then it's like a strobe light. Okay, Moshe Rabbeinu is in a constant flashing light so much that it's like he's walking, even though it's nighttime, he's walking around as if it's day. Other than Nevi'im get one flash of light and then that's it. And then people like us who are not Nevi'im, but also not the vulgar, are like walking around with like, flashlights that or like reflecting things. And then the vulgar are the people who never see any light whatsoever. So that's what the Ralbag is. He's invoking that mashal here, saying that the deepest ideas in existence will come to a person like these brief flashes of light, but they're very brief, and then everything is plunged into darkness again. Okay, we good? All right. So now he starts to talk about the particulars. Oh, here, hold on a second. V'yoser mash efshar shivad elo misodos hametzios hu bazeh ha'olam hashafel rotz lomer hasidur hamuskal asher lo. He says most of what we know of the secrets of existence is in the lower world, meaning the conceptual underpinnings of the lower world. Vulam bashamayim umasha aleim b'madrega. However, that which is in heaven and above that, tie hasagaso chalusha lerochak mitziuso mimitziusam be'etzam v'hamakom. It's very difficult to understand that due to the distance of them in nature and in place. Okay, so in other words, the most lofty ideas in existence we have a hard time getting at all because we're so far from them. Okay, so that's his intro. That's the first part of his intro. So now he starts going into the mechanics of how you gain knowledge, okay, and how it works, and then what the mashal of Tov, the Eitzadas Tov Ra is. Okay, so this is the part that I'm hoping either this is going to whet your appetite and make you want to read the rest of the Ralbag, or you're going to be like, yeah, this is not for me. Okay, these.
Is he frozen for anyone else?
Yeah, for me.
Frozen for me too.
Well, my appetite certainly isn't being whet by this.
I think that's what he meant. That
What did he just say?
he
did
said
say he was hoping.
he was gonna whet our appetite by giving us a silent shiur, and some of us might be like, it's not for us, but not everyone.
Yeah.
Hello?
I think you're muted. Anyways.
Hello. What was the last thing you heard?
Whet our
Either-
appetites.
Yeah, either it's going to whet your appetites or...
That's funny. Wow. Okay. So yeah, it cut out right then. All right. So here's what he says. Ukvar hisbar b'sefer nefesh ha'koch ha'medame v'ha'koch ha'misorer yaniu ha'bal chaim el mash yisnoea elav o mimenu. So the imaginative faculty and the emotive faculty, or the appetitive faculty, let's go with the motive. Together, they move the organism towards that which it is attracted to or repelled from. How so? So the imaginative faculty will yitzayir, it will conjure up the image of something which was perceived by the senses. And the emotive faculty will be aroused by that imaginative depiction, by that image. And the organism will move towards that sensory object which was depicted for it by the imaginative faculty, or it'll flee from it. So what he's saying is like this, okay? Let's say, for example, you feel a hunger pang, okay? And you know that there's a kitchen around the corner. So what will happen is you don't see any sandwiches, okay? But your imaginative faculty, but you have seen sandwiches in the past, okay? And when you saw those sandwiches, your sensory faculty saw it, and then it was recorded in your memory. So when you get hungry, your imaginative faculty conjures up an image of a sandwich, okay? And that image is what attracts you and what awakens your emotions to seek the real sandwich, okay? But the key is that you're not being attracted to the real sandwich. You're being attracted to the real sandwich via the image of the sandwich that exists in your mind, okay? And similarly, when you are boiling water and your hand gets slightly close to the pot or the kettle, and you start to feel the heat. So your imaginative faculty brings up a frightening image of you being burned based on past experiences that you've had, or based on Adobe Photoshopped past experiences that are exaggerated. And then when you recoil from the heat, it's not because you are recoiling from the actual physical thing. you're recoiling based on the shiur, the imagination, the imagined version of it. Okay, so that's how he's saying that attraction and repulsion actually works. And this is not just for humans. This is also for the higher animals. Obviously, not all animals have imagination, but certainly the higher mammals do. I don't think bees and insects or other insects do, and I don't really know in between. Okay. Ulefi shebezeh haofen yikrish la'adam sheyimashech achar hahanos hagufios. And because in this manner it happens to a person that he is drawn after the bodily pleasures, asher heim marchikos oso mishleimuso, which distance him from perfection, hine yihi hakoach hamisorer hu hayetzer hara v'hakoach hadimione hu manhigo. This was like an earth-shattering revelation to me when I first read it here. Okay, let's just read it a little slower now. The koach hamisorer, the emotive faculty, is the yetzer hara, and the imaginative faculty is its rider, okay, or its driver. Okay, and note why he says it's the yetzer hara. Only not because it's evil, but because it distances you from perfection. Okay. And now check this last sentence out, and then we'll clarify if we need be. But the imaginative faculty is itself a tool for your human perfection. But it is also a tool for distancing you from perfection. Okay? So in other words, the imaginative faculty can bring you away from perfection, or it could bring you towards perfection. So we know how it brings us away from perfection. How does the imaginative faculty bring you towards perfection? I'm not sharing the screen because I want to find something here. What do you think he means by that?
I can help you understand ideas, perhaps.
Yeah, how? Like give me an example.
You kind of like imagine concepts, like as like I don't know, like an allegory for a concept, so to speak.
Okay, so you could use it in the. I think you're still thinking of the imaginative sense in like when we speak of like imagine, like use your imagination. But remember, the strict definition of imagination is just like taking things that you've seen and then manipulating them. So let's say, for example, when a scientist, when a physicist is thinking about like the structure of matter, you know, or a chemist or something like that. So when you are imagining. You have not actually seen subatomic phenomena, you know, but your mind is building models of it using images of like, you know, and maybe that's what you meant by mashal, but you know, actual models. Or like, let's say, for example, you are doing an experiment and you make a bunch of observations, and then in your mind's eye, you bring up all those things and start looking for patterns, you know, or in halacha, when you're doing a sugya, let's say like a sukkah or something like that. And you're you know, imagining the dimensions of the sukkah, or like the halakhic principles, Isaac, not necessarily as images, okay, but like, you know, you're still using your imagination for it. I'm trying to find one thing here. Give me 1 second. Hold on.
I have a question on this.
Yeah, sure. You can ask a question while I'm looking for this.
According to the Rambam, isn't in the Torah the parts of you that you can actually control and the Bechir in?
Yes.
So how is that the Yetzer Hara then? If you could use that for Tov.
Good question. I actually need to reread that part of the Rambam. You're talking about the Rambam in the Shemona Perakim?
Yeah.
Yeah, I need to reread that. I've been meaning to reread that anyway. Yeah, I'd have to look at that again. Did I recently, not related to what you just said, but did I recently mention the Isaac Newton mashal with the apple in a shiur?
I feel like you
No.
Yeah. Okay, it's possible that I did. So I just remembered that I also made a PowerPoint about this for my 10th graders when I was trying to get them to understand this concept here. Hold on just a second here. So for example, okay, so you got an apple falling, right? So Newton, you got Newton down there, okay? So the one person says, look, so I got this from Rabbi Sachs, by the way. Look, it's food. I can eat this and get pleasure. This other person says, look, it's produce. I can sell this and get money. This person says, look, it's a weapon. I can throw this at my enemy and get revenge. This person says, so what? I don't like animals, and therefore I have no use for them. And Newton says, look, it is an example of a physical body in motion. If I think about this, maybe I'll discover a law of nature which will help me to appreciate Hashem's wisdom in the universe. So what all of these have in common here is relating to the apple as a pleasure-seeking animal, right? That what pleasure can I get out of this? Or if it's not relevant to me pleasure-wise, then I don't care about it. And Newton is relating to it as a truth-seeking Tzelem Elokim. So they're all using their senses and then recording it in their mind, in their imagination, in their koach hazocher. But then the question is, how do you relate to it? Do you relate to it on the basis of your koach hamisorer, or do you relate to it on the basis of your koach hahigioni, your rational faculty? So that's what he means when he says that the same tool, the imagination, which can be used to distance you from perfection, can also be used for your perfection itself. Now, let me just ask you a question here. So we're officially at the end of shiur, but let me just see how much we have left to go here. Would anyone object to taking 10 more minutes?
No, that's fine.
Okay, because I think just getting this overview would be good. And that way we can decide what we want to do next time. Okay, it says, Umvur gam kain shebekan hasagos enushios, einan la'adam b'meshu adam. So it is also clear that there are human concepts, hasagos are concepts, which do not belong to man qua man. But they are common to man and animal. Okay, so that's concepts of the good and the bad. Ki'ilu tomar, for example, yedias ha'arev me'adorim v'habilti arev. So knowing what is pleasant and not pleasant. Asher hu tov v'ra etel katas hanashim. So some people, that's how they define pleasure. That's how they define good and bad, based on pleasant and not pleasant. V'hamo'il mehem v'hamazik, or beneficial or harmful. V'hanai mehem v'hamaguna, or like appropriate and despicable, or like beautiful and disgusting. Ki al kol elo hadvarim ye'amru hatov v'hara lefi ma shiur ha'anashim. People call these things tov and ra. To the point where some people call pleasure the good and ra its opposite. And displeasure its opposite ra. Some people call honor the good and its opposite bad. Some people will view the good as victory and dominance or authority, and ra is its opposite. Some people view beautiful actions as the good, and their opposite the bad. And some people view the beneficial as the good and the detrimental as the bad. Okay, so in other words, you've got all of these concepts of tov and ra, which are not concepts for humans qua human, but they're concepts for humans qua animals. And he's going to go and prove this now, or give examples. He says, commotion is called Sefer Amidos, like the Aristotle wrote Sefer Amidos. These things, even though you do perceive them through the intellect by way of the senses in a certain way, just like other concepts, they will not bring your soul to having eternal existence. Okay, hisharus. But they might bring you away from it. Okay, how so? Let's say you're drawn to pleasure, due to the enjoyment you get from it. Okay, that you're going to end up spending all of your time investigating these things, and it'll prevent you from apprehension of the order of existing things in the universe, which gives you true existence. So what does he mean? So let's say knowledge of I don't know, cuisine. Okay. Let's say like knowledge of culinary knowledge. Okay. So is culinary knowledge knowledge? So the answer is yes, because you do use your intellect for it. However, it's not knowledge qua human, because animals also have knowledge of what tastes good and what doesn't taste good. It's just that their knowledge is not as sophisticated. So what will happen if you devote yourself to studying culinary phenomena? So you're going to end up spending your whole time infinitely like finding out all these culinary like subtleties and categories, and it'll cause you to become more occupied in being involved in food, and that's going to take you away from being able to be involved in the study of the universe, which is going to be where you truly get eternal existence. Okay? Do you see where he's going, by the way, in the mashal of Gan Eden?
Eitz hadas tovara.
Eitz hadas tovara, right? So the Eitz hadas tovara is knowledge of the good and the bad in all these examples that he mentioned, and that leads you away from the Eitz HaChaim, which is going to be a mashal for, if you can guess, I mean, it gives you eternal life, but what do you think the Eitz HaChaim is a mashal for?
Actual chachma.
Actual chachma, right? Chachma of existence, which actually gives you eternal life. Okay, let's go on now. So he says, I said that we have these concepts in common with animals. Why? Okay, so certainly many animals have the ability to grasp pleasure and pain. Okay. Other animals have the ability to perceive the useful and the not useful, to the point where they flee from things that are harmful, even though they did not experience them first. Like little chickens that run away from from chicken hawks, or a sheep that runs away from Zev Granick. El Hadvarim HaMo'ilim, and they approach, or they seek out beneficial things. Kamosh Timsa B'chulda, like you find with the chulda is a weasel, I think, right? Shekasher Neshacha Nachash, that when a snake bites it, Telich Esev Echad Bal Kotzim V'Tisgolel Alav Kadeshi Nakev Ora B'Makomos Rabim V'Yatim Min Eres HaNachash. Okay, I didn't know weasels did this, but when a weasel gets bitten by a venomous snake, it will go to a thorny bush, puncture its own skin, and roll around to try to get the venom out. Okay. V'chein timsa bisanunis shekasher yinakru ene efrocheha tavakesh esev hasanunis asher hu mo'il ze to'elas nifla. So sanunis is some sort of bird, and it says when the eyes of its young are pecked out, it'll go get a certain herb called the sanunis and put it in the eyes of its young in order to, which will have a tremendous benefit. Okay, so if only the Ralbag knew about monkeys, right? Like, that you have like actual animals that can actually figure out how to make tools and how to like be involved in practical thinking. So really, that's what he means when he says that, you and the monkey, the only difference between what you and the monkey are doing when you're building your house and when the monkey is like trying to build something to get the banana out of the, off of the tree, it's just a quantitative difference. Okay. Whereas when you study science, that's a qualitative difference. That's really using your concepts as humans. Okay. But you and the monkey are the same when you're doing practical stuff. You'll find lots of examples of this. Now, this last one's a weird one. Some animals have the concepts of inappropriate and appropriate. A horse will not mate with its mother. I didn't know that was a thing that other animals did. And a camel will not mate in front of any other creature. Okay, it's a sanua animal, the camel. That's why you should name your daughter Gamal. V'tarnagol lo yizakik l'tarnagolis imlo paisa tchila. The rooster doesn't mate with the I almost said doesn't mate with the roostess, but that's not the word, with the chicken, right? With the chicken, unless he paisa tchila, unless he like appeases is not a good word when you're talking about like mating, like flirts with her first, Okay, so this shows you that like animals also have the concepts of like appropriate and inappropriate. All right. So then he says, all right, we're almost done here. Zeha ofen machil. Since people have a huge range of concepts in the good and the bad in this manner, to the point where what this guy thinks is good, that guy thinks is bad, right? Like you got the guy who is spending his whole life in base pleasures, and he thinks that that's the good, and abstention is the bad. And you've got the evangelical Christian who thinks that base pleasures is the devil's work, and abstention is like the greatest good. So therefore, you have lots of different personalities among people or dispositions. Because everyone chooses what he thinks is the good, as as Aristotle writes in the Nicomachean Ethics. Here we go. Misogyny alert. Okay, so Ralbag actually held that females are actually inferior to males, and that females were created to serve men. Okay, not a popular opinion these days. He says that he says that the female human is unique among the females of other species. That her purpose, she was created to serve the male in order that he have the freedom to be able to strive in abstract knowledge to reach his success. But with other animals, the female and the male are equal. Okay. So he says that's all we saw fit as our introduction. Now he's going to explain it. So that was his overview, and basically what the rest of his pirush is he goes through every detail of the Gan Eden story and shows how it is teaching you about the faculties of the soul and what the relationship is between them, and then how to use them to gain eternal knowledge through seeking knowledge of the universe, and then how the Yetzer Hara and the imaginative faculty work together to prevent you from reaching a perfection, and how God modified the psyche as a result of giving, as a result of these tendencies, that's the klalos, to, I say modify them, in order to try to accommodate for this temptation that they're drawn towards. So that's the Ralbag's whole approach to Gan Eden. The question is, are you going to be interested in going through it in the Psukim? So I'll leave that to you to decide, but at least now you know what he holds that this is about. Okay. You don't have to.
Sounds pretty cool.
Yeah. Alrighty. So I guess that's it. Any last minute questions? Sorry we went over time, but I figured it was better to finish this now, so we can choose what to do next time instead of continuing with this.
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Alrighty.
Thank you.